Okay.
All right, welcome everybody. This is the Elevated Medicine Podcast, February 17th, 2026. And I'm excited to introduce you all today to Dr. Sheila Furey. She's a good friend of mine. I'd say I met her on the battlefield. My family calls her Mighty Mouse because she's this very tiny lady and she packs a mean punch. So I'm excited for you guys to hear what she has to share today. She is a child psychiatrist, and she was in the early days. She sniffed out uh, the lies and things that were happening or swirling around all of us, and she became a major lifeline for a lot of people who were looking for help and not able to get it from their doctors. She teamed up with Dr. Paul Merrick, and when he was just making the rounds in Virginia, and sometimes she subbed in for him when he couldn't make it to share with people about ivermectin and how perfectly tailored it was to the symptoms of COVID. Since then, she has continued to treat patients medically and has been heavily involved in legislation, education, and conversations with people trying to, I would say, the she makes big waves by combining all of those things. And so we're grateful to have her here with us today. Good morning, Dr. Fury.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. It's a delight to be here with you.
We're very glad. This is sponsored by Carolina Holistic Medicine and Dr. Yusuf Salibi, or we call him JP for short, his Priority Health Academy. So, what can you in the midst of all of the craziness during the COVID era? I don't think you intended to start an organization, but one sort of formed around you, and that's called Virginia Medical Freedom Alliance, for those of you who haven't heard of that before. And what would you say the main mission of your team is?
When we began in 2021, 22, and it was to educate people and protect people. So it was educating people about early treatment available for COVID-19, the danger of the shot, that the shot was experimental and dangerous. And so that was our mission, and to really begin to educate people about the sanctity of the doctor patient relationship and restore that rather than having medicine dictated and mandated.
Mhm.
And that was our starting premise. And once we opened that door, we very quickly realized that the tyranny within the medical system was expansive. And the first thing we took on was the childhood vaccine schedule. But we began to realize very quickly that human life needed to be protected from conception to natural death, and that the legislation being proposed um, nationwide, but particularly here in Virginia, was placing every life in danger. And that we had to be able to have a platform in which to educate people about the sanctity of life, and that and hold physicians accountable or healthcare providers accountable for their decisions. That if you are choosing to act against life and against free will, that you need to be held accountable and your views need to be made public.
Mhm. Well, did you face backlash with that?
Of course. So the medical establishment does not want to hear about educated choice. And so we had various meetings with the Virginia Department of Health. We had people who regularly spoke at the Virginia Department of Health. educating them about the dangers of the COVID shots, educating them about the childhood vaccine schedule, the importance of informed consent and not having mandated medicine. We also spoke about medical assistance in dying, and we have spoken up against the abortion and born alive bills, and people do not want to hear the truth. And particularly at the Virginia Department of Health. The Virginia Department of Health will say on the one hand that they are interested, their number one priority is maternal fetal health, and yet they're not willing to look into the damage that is caused by the childhood vaccine schedule. They are not willing to look at the impact that abortion has on women's health as well as men's health, all right, because it affects both men and women. And that if we don't look at the underlying factors that make pregnancy for some women very high risk, then we're continuing to support a lie. And we need to be able to fully educate women about the risk and the benefits and alternatives of any procedure. And how do we, so if we're about making people healthy and making healthy decisions rather than being dependent on a pharmaceutical industry and a healthcare industry that wants you perpetually sick.
Mm-hmm. So I know you have worked with the transgender, I would call it a crisis affecting the children. I know you have done a lot with that, with the vaccine schedule, the ivermectin. You've been really vocal about the legislation with that. But right now, your focus is on the maternal fetal issues.
So I think we're trying to hit all of them, and that stretches is a little thin. But the main thing is trying to educate people. And again, when you're talking about the deception of the healthcare industry, the deception is very real with the transgendered movement. The entire lie is that you can, that your sex is, or gender is what you've been identified at birth, rather than you are either male or female, you are either a girl or a boy, that you cannot change your sex. All right, you can change the outside, but you cannot change your fundamental biologic identity. And that these young girls and boys who are having hormone blockers, taking cross-sex hormones, and even into adulthood, the damage that does. So not only to an adolescent who's being told that we're going to put you on hormone blockers and that this can be reversed. Number one, it cannot be reversed, or very rarely can be reversed. And they know that. And the destruction that it does to the body. So the destruction in terms of normal development. When in the history of medicine have we stopped normal development because someone has a feeling, right? Everyone has feelings every day and they're very transient. But this is the first time in medicine that because someone has a feeling and a thought, and the thought is delusional, all right? It is a fixed false belief that they are, in fact, the opposite sex. And we are endorsing that delusion, and we're providing them with hormones or medication that blocks hormones, cross-sex hormones. And all of this is completely disruptive to the physiology of the developing adolescents, and in particular, their brain development. Because as we hit adolescence and we have those huge hormone surges, that is also feeding the development of our brain. And remember that the brain is not fully developed until we're 25 or 26 years old. And so if you are starting hormone blocking agents prior to the age of 10 or even younger, because some of these physicians who are prescribing these are actually doing, looking at these medications at a much earlier age. It's very disturbing. And the impact that this will have not only on the growth and development of their body, but of their brain. And then how are they going to continue to make cognitive decisions as an adult when their brain has not been allowed to fully develop? It's really criminal behavior on the part of the field of medicine.
Yes. Well, this, I think this November there are four bills that are or three bills that have come up, and then one comes up in the spring. Those are uh, under your microscope right now, correct?
Absolutely. So the first one is coming up on April 21st, and this is what they're calling the Fair Election Bill. All right. And it will currently in Virginia, a nonpartisan group decides the congressional districts every 10 years. And that is based on census data. Currently, what the General Assembly wants to do and what is on the election is to redraw the congressional districts prior to the November 26th election, in which, based on your designation of Republican and Democrat, they want to redraw those districts so that they have 10 Democratic districts and one Republican district. Now, at the onset, you are not allowed to draw districts based on political affiliation. All right? It is a population-based decision. And this is what the people of Virginia voted for overwhelmingly in 2021, a nonpartisan drawing of congressional districts. And that has led us to 6 Democrats in Congress and 5 Republicans. The state is approximately split in Republicans and Democrats. And currently the Democrats probably have a little bit more, but it's really a very closely matched Republican versus Democrats or Democrats versus Republican. This would change that entire makeup and allow the districts to be drawn so that we would have 10 Democrat elected, potentially elected members of Congress and 1 Republican. And what the legislative body, the Democratic controlled legislative body is saying is this is to balance what other states are doing in terms of their congressional redistricting. And I just want to point out that states that are doing this, there are states, Massachusetts has not had an elected Republican in over 20 years. All right. California has a super majority of their congressmen are Democrat, even though the population is probably 60-40, Democrat to Republican. And so in all of these states where they have super majority of Democrats, they have been gerrymandering for decades. All right. And so Virginia has decided we're not doing that. In 2021, by over 1 million votes, the people of Virginia decided we do not want to gerrymander, okay? And yet, because of the current control that the Democrats have in the state of Virginia at the executive, the Senate, and the House, this is what they want to do. And so, and they're calling it, by the very wording of the bill, fair elections, restoring fair elections. Well, how does redrawing the districts to allow 10 congressional seats to go to Democrats and 1 to Republicans, which does not reflect the population of the state of Virginia, restore fair elections in Virginia? And so that this is the big, and this is, there's also some illegality in this. because the current uh, law or code in Virginia is that after this is approved by the General Assembly to go on the ballot, it must be 90 days before the election can start. Well, because of 45 days of early voting starts on March 6th, and which is not, that 90 days has not occurred. So they're breaking their own code. Additionally, when this passed in the General Assembly for the first time, it was in October of 2025. So they called a special session of the General Assembly to pass this legislation out of the regular session time in order to get it again passed for in the 2026 General Assembly. What they didn't do in 2025 is they didn't allow the state registrars to have notice and publish notice prior to that session, emergency General Assembly session in October of 2025. So again, at multiple levels, they have not followed code, election code, and this did go to the Supreme Court of Virginia, and the Supreme Court decided we're just going to wait for the outcome of the election. Again, the Supreme Court is derelict in their duty when you have obviously this is not following code, and they're electing to do wait and see policy. That is unacceptable, right? So if you break the law and does everyone get to decide, well, if nobody was really hurt by me breaking the law, I guess it doesn't count, right? So if I embezzle $1 million and that's only 0.01% of the budget, I guess that's okay because not very many people were hurt, okay? So it's making it legitimate or legitimizing people breaking the law, not following code, because we're just going to wait and see what happens. That's not acceptable.
Well,
so
are you?
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask you, there's so much strategy that is going behind this. Are you seeing patterns in that, at least that you can predict what's going to happen?
Well, we know that at the federal level, Hakeem Jeffries, who is the House minority leader, said that they are willing, at the federal level, willing to put tens of millions of dollars into the state of Virginia to make sure that this amendment passes, and they are able to redraw the district lines. All right. Now, what is further complicated, this puts all of the current congressmen in a bind because most people have their election campaigns and are running their election campaigns for the November election now, right? None of that can occur because we have to wait until after this April 21st ballot initiative. And then if this ballot initiative is then challenged in court, which it will be, this again further disenfranchises the voters because we have no idea who we're going to be able to vote for.
Well, and you mentioned the wording of this, the fair elections. The words are made with positive connotations that make people think this is all well and good, but there's hidden meanings in that. What are the words you're looking at in these bills?
So it's the wording of this amendment is to restore. Let me just read it to you directly. It is the question, the ballot initiatives read, should the Constitution of Virginia be amended to allow the General Assembly to temporarily adopt new congressional districts to restore fairness in the upcoming elections. To restore fairness, as if they aren't fair now. It looks pretty fair to me at 6-5, okay? But they are literally, the map to redraw the districts makes it 10-1. And there is nothing to prohibit them in redrawing these to make it 11-0. All right? They can literally make sure that every congressman is from Northern Virginia. So they can draw lines that loop around the southern part of the state, or particularly the southwest part of the state, that will give a minority of the voters in Southwest Virginia will be included with a majority of that population coming from Northern Virginia. So it's all about the numbers. So you can draw lines that just swoop around the corner of the state, and that all 11 congressional districts could go Democrat, and that people in their area are not represented. So the goal is to have a majority of the delegates all from Northern Virginia. And so, and you can go online and look at the map, and it only blocks out Southwest Virginia. That is just a proposed map. That isn't the map that necessarily will be what is approved finally if this bill passes. So they literally can draw the congressional districts so that it is 11-0.
So if that passes, does it pave the way for the other three in November?
So the other three ballots in November are separate. Okay, so the other three constitutional issues are the right to reproductive health, the restoration of voting rights for felons, and the marriage amendment, which allows marriage between any two adult persons based on without regard to sex or gender. All right. And so, and we'll do the easy one first, the marriage amendment. All right. Currently, it is legal in the state of Virginia for two people of the same sex to marry. All right. It's the same sex. The danger of this amendment is that there is no protection for religious organizations, religious churches, individuals who do not wish to perform same-sex marriage. So currently in the state of Virginia, if your church, or you as an individual pastor or an individual person who's allowed to perform marriages, and you wish not to perform a same-sex marriage, you can do that. All right. It also opens the window to gender. It would be the first time that gender is in the Constitution. So gender is not is a social construct. It is not a biologic reality. We are either male or female. And this introduces gender into the Constitution. And that means with that introduction, every other part of the Constitution can be rewritten with gender instead of male and female, biologic sex. And so we don't, it is critically important that we stick to facts. We are either male or female. We can't transpose ourselves. And we need to maintain that in the state constitution, because again, this allows people to change their driver's license, their birth certificates, all kinds of things, and it's not a reality. You cannot change your biological sex. And so this will open the door, and it will further open the door Because when this amendment was originally drafted, it was written so that it was a marriage between consenting persons. That left it open to marriage between an adult and a minor. This was opening the door to adults and child marriages. And it was only after that was called out that they revised the bill to make it consenting adults. So you know exactly where this legislation is going, because they want to remove the taboo from adults marrying minors, right? And so we know that will be the next step here in Virginia, because that was the original language of the amendment. Then the next amendment is the reproductive health bill. And this is the freedom to make decisions regarding reproductive health. And it is not limited to women. It encompasses men and women. And reproductive health not only involves, we know that the priority for this bill is to allow abortion in all 3 trimesters of pregnancy and deny health care to a child born alive after an abortion, right? And for people who want to understand, well, that can't happen, that actually does happen. There are approximately 2,100 live births post-abortion every year. And that number may be more. So one of the issues is that a majority of abortions are done by chemical abortion. That is, mifepristone and misoprostol are the 2 drugs given. The first drug stops progesterone in the mother, and because of the lack of progesterone, the fetus starves, right? And that then the baby dies, and then misoprostol causes the mother to have contractions, and the contents of the uterus are dispelled. All right. One of the things that, because mifepristone, the first drug of the 2 drug series, has significant side effects. Approximately 11% of the women who take this drug end up in the emergency room with a life-threatening condition. It has not only a black box warning, it has a REMS protocol. So this means that, and the reason is that the women who take this can develop sepsis. So sepsis is an infection of your blood. And what happens is they're not presenting with the typical symptoms of depression, so of sepsis. They're presenting with, they don't have a fever. They don't have like a location that can be discerned of swelling or signs of infection. So if you have an appendicitis, you have pain in the right lower quadrant, okay? And so you have a locus of pain, you have abdominal signs, and you have an elevated white count, all right? And you could have a fever. If someone has pneumonia, they have coughing, they have pain in their chest, they have shortness of breath. So all of those things we can look at. What happens with women who take mifepristone is that all of those, and that infection that is occurring is all silently occurring. And the first signs that she has sepsis is in her an elevated heart rate and a low blood pressure. So she's already cardiovascular compromised, all right? And so when she's reached this stage of pregnancy and in sepsis, 50% mortality rate for sepsis, all right? And so you have young women who are dying because of these drugs. They don't even know that they're ill until they like, oh my God, they pass out simply because they're not able to maintain their blood pressure, right? They go to the emergency room and sometimes they're able to save them and sometimes they're not. So one of the things that the pro-abortion people say is that women are dying because they don't have access to abortion. And they cite a number of cases. One of them in particular is in Georgia. And this woman actually had access to the abortion pill, took the abortion pill. She died at home before she ever hit the emergency room. She never made it to the emergency room. All right. There is another case, again, woman had access to the abortion pill. She took it, she presented to the emergency room. She was in full-blown sepsis and they could not stabilize her. And she also died. All right. And if you look on the website there's a website called Plan C, which is one of the locations where you can buy the abortion pill. So the abortion pills are FDA approved for the first 10 weeks of pregnancy. On this website, they actually talk about giving the abortion pill past the 12th week. All right. So 12, 13, 14, 15 weeks. All right. So where it's not FDA approved, which increases the risk and likelihood that you are going to have complications and you're going to end up in the emergency room and your potential for death is real. The other aspect of this is, so when the abortion pill was first placed on the market, you had to see an OBGYN. They had to do an ultrasound of the uterus to show that the pregnancy was in the uterus and determine the stage of pregnancy. All right. So 2 things to save the life of the mother. Those are no longer required. So if you have a positive pregnancy test, but let's say it's in the fallopian tube, all right? If you take this drug, you are risking your life because the pregnancy is not in the uterus, right? What you also don't know is, what if you're pregnant with twins or triplets, all right? So is the dose of medication that you were been given appropriate for the fact that you are carrying twins or triplets? So none of that, all of those things that were designed to help protect women are no longer necessary. And the physicians who are providing it are not being held, or the people who are writing the prescriptions are no longer being held accountable for that. So when we talk about the right to abortion, it is a guaranteed right. What we also have to look at is the responsibility that this places on healthcare providers. So if you have a young mother who comes into the emergency room or into a clinic and says, I would like the abortion pills, or I would like a surgical abortion, whatever, and you are morally opposed to that, will you be able to say, no, I will not provide that? There is no accommodations in this constitutional amendment for any healthcare provider to say, no, I will not participate in this.
Wow.
And so this is placing medical technicians, nurses, physician assistants, anesthesiologists, all of these people are going to be in jeopardy if they do not participate. And so many physicians will leave the practice of medicine, they will leave emergency rooms because they don't want to participate in this. Because we took an oath, a Hippocratic oath, to save lives. All right? We did not take an oath to participate in unethical behavior. And this is also, we see this at the end of life, but I'm going to focus on this amendment. But there's a big aspect to this in the medical assistance in dying, euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide movement. This legislation, because it is a right, minors, there is no parental exceptions. So the parental consent is not required. All right. So if you have young, minors, and I'm 10, 11, 12, going in seeking birth control, no questions are asked. So you have to look at, why would a young girl or a young boy be seeking birth control at an age when they shouldn't be having sex? So for some of these girls, they may be sexually abused and no questions are asked. And as a provider, one of the things that it's important for me to ask patients who are sexually active is to investigate the nature of that sexual activity. So number one, are they being sexually abused? Are they being manipulated by an older teenager, okay, or an adult, right? Or is it the case that they might be bipolar, so they have a mental illness, and with that mental illness, are sexually precocious, I'm putting it nicely, okay? We want to know that so we can protect the child. But in this amendment, because it is a right, it is protected and no questions are asked. It opens the door to child trafficking, all right? So if you are a person who is trafficking young women, and we know this from people who observed outside abortion clinics, that the same cars pull up week after week after week, dropping women off to have abortions, all right? And so if you bring a person to have an abortion, no questions are asked. So if you are the perpetrator of a crime, right? So as in Northern Virginia, we saw the teacher that took a young girl to have an abortion without parental consent, okay? So if you are a teacher or you are an adult and you have sexually abused a girl, and she's pregnant, and you take her to have an abortion to hide the evidence, all right, no questions will be asked. So even if a young girl comes in and it is obvious that she has been abused, all right, again, no questions are asked because they want to protect any individual who brings a woman or a young boy to receive care, reproductive care. So in the sense of how can this affect young boys? Well, if you bring a young boy in to be sterilized, all right, again, no questions are asked. So surgical sterilization will absolutely be given to minors without parental consent and without the child even having full understanding of what is happening to them. Because the child, to be able to tell the child that this is going to have direct implications on not only your physical body, but your brain development. The additional aspects of this legislation include in vitro fertilization, and surrogacy. There is no protection in this legislation to prevent a pedophile from adopting children. And I mean no protection. And we know this directly from Pennsylvania, who is now emergently trying to pass legislation to prevent pedophiles from adopting children via surrogates. So this is not me just going off and saying, oh, this is just hypothetical. This is not hypothetical. Additionally, we have a couple in California who had 21 children via surrogates. They are now being prosecuted. All right? So because, again, this is a right, we can't ask questions, we are simply making children a commodity. Right? Further, and this is a disturbing aspect of this, there is a significant market, all right, $1 billion industry in fetal organs. So now the pharmaceutical companies or other companies that are invested in obtaining fetal organs can have purchase a child via a surrogate. They can take that development of the child to the age that they want it, and then they can induce the labor and delivery of that child so that they can directly harvest the organs. Again, this is not hypothetical, right? It's a $1 billion industry, and that people are saying, well, this isn't possible. All right. One of the legislators actually said fetal organ harvesting stopped in 1993. That is completely false, because NIH, just in the last couple of weeks, said they will no longer support research projects that harvest fetal organs. All right. So this is the National Institute of Health. Our government has been paying our tax dollars, all right, and participated in fetal organ harvesting. Right. And so if the government has just stopped this, that means all of these other organizations, entities, will continue to do it. All right, our pharmaceutical companies and cosmetic companies and other companies who want to genetically engineer and genetically modify and do their research, that has not been checked, okay? And one of the mechanisms that they do this through is when they deliver the child, they tell the mother, do you want to donate the tissue? All right. So it sounds very benign. You're just going to donate tissue. In fact, you have to remember that every organ in the body is made of tissue. It's made of cells. So they can even say, do you want to donate the cells? And what people are thinking is, well, this is just, a few cells, a clump of cells, a blood clot. No, what they're talking about specifically and what they're doing is entire organs. And so the value, this mother has just donated this, and now they own it, and now it can be sold. And there are literally fetal organ harvesting banks, and you can subscribe to those harvesting banks and get a regular supply of hearts, livers, kidneys, lungs, whatever you want. So it's the incredibly disturbing, dark side of the field of medicine. And even as a physician, reading this, understanding the language of it, and understanding what it is that the research entities want in terms of fetal organs. It's most disturbing. And this is why we have to fight this legislation, because freedom means exactly I can do whatever I want. You can't stop me. All right. Protection means we are not going to prosecute doctors, nurses, pedophiles, sex traffickers, anyone. You are free to assist in any way you want. And then lastly, it says there are restrictions in the third trimester. So for some people, that'll make it look, well, yeah, they're not going to do third trimester abortions. False. Because when you look at A, which is freedom, with total freedom, there are no restrictions. All right. So that was a clause that was added just to pull people in to say, no, the state actually is putting restrictions on. The state is not putting any restrictions on this. And we know this because 2 amendments were proposed to this legislation. One was that minors would have to know, there had to be parental notification for minors, and that if a baby was born alive, it would be given health care. Both of those amendments were defeated. So when they say this is all about healthcare, no, this is all about money making for the institutions that provide abortions. So it's disturbing at every single level. And what is further is disturbing is how we're not able to talk about abortion, right? It's a woman's right to choose. We have dismissed the role of men and minimized that they should have any input in the decision. And as I've been talking to young men, one of the things I pointed out is this is your child. Is it simply okay for you to allow your child to be murdered? And they never wanted to look at it that way. It was simply, well, it's her choice. This is your child. This is the mother's child. This is the father's child. We need to look at this as a child, because it is a child from the moment of conception until birth. It doesn't change. We're just in a different developmental stage. But you are a unique human being from the moment of conception. And we must respect and honor that.
Well, I mean, this is it's shocking. There's that level of detail just kind of hidden in the words. The abortion pills that you mentioned, does this allow for middle schoolers or high schoolers to get them from school nurses even?
Correct. So many middle and high schools now have what we call school-based health centers. And they can have a nurse practitioner come into those, and they can absolutely prescribe these pills when they're at school. And the question is, can boys go in and request them?
Oh,
Right? So men are clearly getting the abortion pill through the mail. And we know of multiple cases across the United States where men have put these pills in the drinks and in the food of the women because they found out they were pregnant, don't want them to be pregnant, don't want to be responsible, and have caused them to have for the baby to die. All right. And the question is will they even be prosecuted? So that they're given a drug without their knowledge or consent, and it has caused the death of another individual. So legally, there's a big nightmare out there.
yeah. A full-on assault on the unborn what do you think, what in our society has contributed to this point?
Well, for most of my life, I've been told we don't talk about religion and we don't talk about politics. And that this has been looked at as simply a religious issue, a moral issue. It is a moral issue, okay? But it's also a fundamental medical issue, all right? And we have to be able to talk about it. And in my entire life, in terms of churches, I have probably heard less than 5 times, and I think it's probably twice that I specifically remember from the pulpit someone talking about abortion. And yet, and what we also know is that approximately 40% of women who go in to have an abortion are regular attendants at a church. So our churches have failed. They have failed to teach, they have failed to lead, and that it is so important that we be able to speak about this, to speak about how important human life is. And even from the standpoint of an atheist, okay? So there is a group organization called Secular Pro-Life. They don't believe in God, okay? And one of their contentions is that you are a unique individual from the moment of conception. You only have one life to live, one. And so does that give someone else the right to take your life? Right? So taking God completely out of the picture, it is a recognition that you are a unique human being at the moment of conception. And remember, biologically, the mother does not decide that she is pregnant. The baby controls the pregnancy. That first cell sets off a hormonal cascade, telling the mother that she is pregnant, telling the mother that she has to maintain the uterine lining. All right. The growing ball of cells is sending mother all of the signals in order to allow implantation, to allow the development of the placenta. All of that is directed by the baby, not the mom. Okay. Right? And so when you take, that is the power and I think just the awesome beauty of pregnancy. And we're completely minimizing that and dismissing that as if it's a random act and mysteriously a baby comes out 9 months later. It is an intricate design. And that the destruction that is done to not only the baby because of the loss of their life, but to the mother. So mothers, and I would agree, and you can't minimize the impact on fathers, but mothers, the rate of depression, anxiety, substance abuse, psychosis, suicidal ideation, all of that occurs, and suicide attempts. So in the women that I have treated over the years who have had abortion, the typical number of suicide attempts is approximately 3. That is really sad. And these women often do not reveal this information for often 20 years. They keep this secret. And they look to everything else to try to protect themselves and overcome the shame and guilt of what had occurred to them so many years ago. And so getting them to acknowledge it, getting them the support and the comfort that they need in order to reveal this information and then be healed from that which has occurred. And fathers also have this. There are fathers that are outside of abortion clinics weeping, begging their girlfriend, not to have the abortion. And so, again, when we have told men that they have no say in this, right? They are just discarded. What does that mean to women? All right. And one of the ways I look at this is, one of the things that we often hear at the General Assembly is that the number one killer of children is guns. The number one killer of children is women who kill their unborn children. Right. And with my daughters are both in their 20s, and 1/3 of their classmates have died from abortion. And so, we looked at Holocausts throughout history. This is the greatest Holocaust that has ever occurred, and we continue to support it. We continue what we have in Canada. Canada is now looking at legislation to allow the euthanization of newborn babies whose parents are poor. So if you're poor or you have an illness, then you can be euthanized at birth. This is a reflection on our society as a whole. It is a reflection on our churches who have not educated people about the sanctity of life, the importance of family, the destruction of family, how important it is to have a mother and a father, that being a single parent is not the ideal. The ideal is to have a unified family and to do the importance of the mother and the father in the home raising the children. This gives stability, all right? The Amish who have, stayed in their own communities, but look at what the gifts the Amish community and the framework that they show the entire rest of the world is that we are able to live independently, securely, and happily with a mother and a father and children, and that we can go one generation to the next generation, and we're all supporting that. All right. I think back to the Waltons and grandma and grandpa in the house. All right. That you have multiple generations in the same household. What a wonderful gift to have, the grandparents intimately involved, or great grandparents, to have that continuity in the importance and the wisdom of the grandparents, great grandparents. Because we have said, well, you're a small town, we're going to move to the city, we're going to get away from, the binds of our parents. We're going to break free. Okay. What we've done by breaking free is we've allowed our own hedonism to rule us. And we don't want to be held accountable for that. And what the multi-generational family fostered is a sense of accountability. All right. That if you were a child and you disrespected your parents will hold you accountable, but the grandparents would also be backing up the parents. Okay. And if the parents were struggling with something, the grandparents were there. All right. That it was a wonderful system that has been systematically destroyed because we want to be the collective. We're all one group and we can't offend anyone. And in the process, we would offend and destroy everyone. And we destroy that which is most important to the sustainability of our country, and that is the family.
Wow, that's important. That feels like an important point. Like in an effort to not offend people or hurt people, we end up doing the exact opposite.
Correct.
Oh, wow. And the convenience, it's almost like they want to be able to do a drive-through murders now. And
Yeah.
they assume that women cannot handle an inconvenience. I mean, it's mislabeled to begin with, but wow.
And I think it does a great disservice to women to tell women, if they're in high school or college and they become pregnant, that you are not capable of handling this pregnancy. That's so demeaning to women. All right. Everyone has obstacles in life. And uh, when we're pregnant, uh, we have a handy carrying case. Okay. The baby just grows. That's all it has to do. And that it is only for a short period of time. And we make that 9 months of pregnancy seem like it's insurmountable. It is not. People go through obstacles all of the time, are inconvenienced all of the time. All right. And we have to accept those inconveniences. But now with this culture, if someone, and we see it radically in some of the murders that have occurred, particularly in adolescence, is if you are trying out for a position on a team and you don't make the team, does that mean you get to kill somebody who did make the team so that you are now a member of the team?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So, but even as, life is an inconvenience. All right. So now we're teaching our children that every time they're inconvenienced, every time they're asked to put effort forward, we're going to accommodate them. And what we're saying to them is, you're just not capable.
Yes.
Rather than saying, you are absolutely capable, right? And I looked to the Olympics, and I believe she was a speed skater, just won Olympic gold. And she had her toddler in her arms. And anyone who is an athlete, particularly at that level, knows the degree of commitment you make to the sport and to practice. Well, obviously, she was able to have a child, return to her workout schedule, and achieve gold. So she was able to do that. And yet, what we're saying to women is, oh, that's too big. You may be jeopardizing your athletic career. You may jeopardize this scholarship. You may jeopardize this if you have this child. And I look at that as, what greater gift can you give than to give this child? And you may relinquish the child. You may give the child up for adoption, or you may keep that child. But that does not mean that your life is over. It doesn't mean that your choices moving forward are over. They may be on a different time schedule. But if I look at my life, my time schedules have often changed. All right. And that was just part of life. And now we're saying, oh, there's only one way to do this. You have to follow this schedule. And if you don't, your whole life will be over. What a sad commentary.
Yeah. Well, are you alone? I mean, are are they trying to pass these kind of bills in other states? And are there other Dr. Sheila Furies out there? Uh, undertaking the same challenges?
So yes, what we're up against, it was not in Virginia alone. And we do have physicians across the country who are standing up to this and speaking out. And so, and we have other organizations that are speaking out. Um, we have the American, um, that's not right, the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs, it's AAPLOG, is physicians, OBGYNs who are protecting both the mother and the child. So they are defeating the lie that in pregnancy, if it's a high risk pregnancy, we must abort the child. That has never been the case in the field of medicine. And in fact, you can deliver a high risk pregnancy in 20 minutes with a C section, and it takes 2 to 3 days to dilate the cervix and an abortion. So if you are having a true medical emergency and the baby, and you need to save both the mother and attempt to save the baby, depending on the fetal stage of development, you can do that surgical procedure in 20 minutes or less, depending on how fast you are. And that's skin to skin. Okay, so you can open a mother up, take the baby out, sew the mother back up very quickly. All right, and that provides the stability for the mother. So you have two patients, and there's a recognition that you have two patients. All right, if the baby is born prior to or delivered prior to 21 weeks, we know that the chances of survival are low. However, you did not directly kill that baby. All right. What you did was you worked to save both of them. Right. After 21 weeks, we know that there is still a high risk of fatality. However, again, your chances of survival after 21 weeks are actually real. And I actually have a neighbor who was born at 21 weeks. He is still alive. And I told him, you're not supposed to be here. And he goes, yeah, I defeated all the odds. So he gets a triple gold medal in my book. And he is now a father. All right. So lives a very full life. And so the fact that you would never have known, and I did not know until he revealed that. All right. So there's nothing about his life that is impaired in any way. He's living a full and healthy life. So
That's quite a testimony.
mhm.
Well, all right. So if people are ready to get involved, they can find your information on vamfa.org. Is that correct?
Yeah. So our website is vamfa.org. And we also have a site called Vote No 4 times, and it's the letter X, .com, which gives you all of the information about the constitutional amendments. So you can go to each of those websites. We are going to put downloaded information on the websites so you can download flyers. Okay, but if and throughout Virginia, you can reach out to organizations that you are involved in. We are speaking around the state. So in Virginia, we have, the AAPLOG, so the American Association of Pro-Life Physician OBGYNs. Sorry, we have the AAPS, which is the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, which is another pro-life organization and of physicians and surgeons and healthcare providers. We have Virginia for Preborn Justice. We have Secular Pro-Life. We have the it is the Progressive Anti-Abortion uprising, which is another very progressive group of individuals, but they do recognize that life begins at conception. That isn't necessarily the group that everyone wants to be involved in, but I think it's important that we look at different perspectives on these issues and the importance of those. And one of the things is, how do we begin to talk about these amendments with our friends, our neighbors, our families? Because it's become such a contentious issue. And one of the ways we start is simply by saying, I disagree, right? I feel that human life begins at conception. Or I disagree, I don't think that we should do third trimester abortions. I think if a baby is born alive, we should do everything to save that baby's life. We should provide him with all of the care that we would provide any other child that was been delivered, even if it is potentially, it's providing them with a comfort because they will not survive, right? That we believe in that you are male and female and that you cannot change your sex, right? So that we stand firmly with that, and we don't compromise on that, and we don't have to get into an argument. We simply state the facts and then we let them stew with that, right? If they have, and then you can say, if you'd like to talk to me more about this, I'd be happy to discuss with you. I'd be happy to share information with you. And that when what has happened so much is that we've been taught to remain silent, and someone expresses their view and we walk away silently and say, I disagree, but I didn't want to cause any disruption. Well, that disruption has cost that failure to act has cost 75 probably million babies. All right. And it isn't just the babies who lost their life, it's the women and the men who are suffering in addition to that loss. So we have a very large part of our population that has been scarred because we have remained silent.
Yeah, there's grief in that.
There's tremendous grief, much sadness, and that we can begin to take an active stand. And I think it's, if you belong to a group or an organization or a church and you would like members of our organization to come and speak, we are happy to do that. We have people who have been speaking all over the state. They go into homes. So if you want to invite all your neighbors over and have someone speak in your home because it's a more intimate setting and you want to limit the number of people, we have members who are willing to do that. All right. So be able to reach out to your community, reach out to your family, figure out what you can do, and contact us. You can reach us through contact on the vamfa.org website. Send us a contact information and we will reach out to you and figure out a way that we can give you the material that you need.
Thank you, Dr. Furey. I feel like I want you to, I would love to invite you back. I feel like you carry the voice of the children inside you. You listen to them. You understand the pulse of what's going on with them. But before we close, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I just want to thank you and for all the work that you and Dr. Salibi do, because you're really, it is knowing that we have a network of physicians and healthcare providers and nurses who are really connecting and listening to the patient. When medicine became a cookie cutter industry, um, it was really sad. And to know that there are doctors across this nation that we can network with who will provide quality care, who will listen to patients, and who are not directly linked to the pharmaceutical industrial complex, um, gives me comfort. All right. And so I want to commend you for all the work that you do, the education that you do. And it's all of us coming from at these issues from different perspectives that is so critically important. All right.
All right. All right, we'll close with that. Everybody just do your small part, and it can be overwhelming, the alarm and the size of these issues. But just start by asking questions and reading for yourself and sharing that with people where you find the open doors. We want to thank Dr. Sheila Furey for taking time out of her day to spread this word, and we hope that you all will have a beautiful day today. And thank you again, Dr. Furey.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Bye.